So I was actually a stay-at-home parent. I stayed at home with the kids, painted in between diaper changes and lunches, and things like that.
And you were still the stay-at-home dad?
Yeah, to back up a little bit, what had happened when we knew we were having a baby, Karen made about the same income. She had a better job than I did. But I had the ability to make some money at home, so we didn't want to put the kids in daycare. So we said, well, it was actually her suggestion. She said, well, why don't you stay home and see if you can make a go at this and, watch the kids and make some money doing that. So that was kind of the impetus to maybe take it a little more serious. And
when you're thinking about subject matter, what motivates you?
that's a difficult one. I think it could come from just sitting here and seeing you and saying, hey, that's kind of interesting. Two people sitting talking, and then you might have that germ of an idea. Then you might start changing it and maybe combining two ideas that weren't that good to begin with, but maybe combining them might be something. So it kind of starts that way, and they come from all different ways. I watched a movie or something and seeing somebody just walk a certain way or do something, or maybe an inanimate object. I remember one time being in my house and seeing a candle, and then you start thinking, oh, what could you do with a candle? And then you think, and then all of a sudden you see a girl walking down the stairs holding a candle, and the shadow, and the light from the candle. So they come from all different ways.
Right.
It's hard to say where.
But the interesting thing is that even your still lives and your depictions of buildings and that sort of thing also have. It seems, when you look at them, the pears and apples are there, but are they going to stay there? Somebody come along and take it, and take a bite out of it. Or there is that feeling of something going to happen. And the same thing with buildings, in a sense. You don't see people necessarily, but you know they're there. And because they're there, something's going to happen.
Yeah,
maybe it's me, but that's the feeling I have when I see.
Well, I don't do a lot of buildings and landscapes, but if I do, it has to be sort of interesting for me. I mean, anytime you're going to invest, 30, 40 hours in a painting, it's got to be interesting.
Sure.
And there's enough people in town that do that kind of thing better than me, buildings and landscapes, and it just doesn't interest me that much to spend a lot of time doing those. Sometimes it's a nice break. Doing people can be a little stressful.
Sure.
So trying to get all the moods and the facial expressions right. So doing a building or doing leaves or rocks or something, sometimes it's just like a nice break.
It's interesting that you make a statement about people doing these things better than you, but what is better? I mean, is it more realistic? Is it more like a photograph, or is it, I mean, that's not what you want from an artist necessarily. You want the expression of the person who's creating the work.
Well, and I get this a lot, good and bad, and I take it as a compliment, but it's not always meant to be. Is they can tell my paintings from across the room, from the color or the way it's painted. But I think that's a good thing,
Sure, sure. Well, you speak of color. I think I remember the very first pieces that I ever saw of your work seemed very dark to me, and I had the feeling that maybe I was looking into this person's soul.
Right. I think people confuse that. I think that people confuse that, the palette with my own personality, or
exactly.
like if the painting's dark, he's got to be dark.
Exactly.
Which I don't think is true. My normal response to that is I don't like bright things. Like it feels uncomfortable for me to be in the sun. I think if you looked at my clothing rack, they're all sort of dismal, drab colors. So I think it has more to do with that than.
But there's so much of your work that has a wonderful play of light. So
I'm getting better, I think. I think they tend to look a little brighter.
Yeah, well, it's not only brightness, but what is lit has a special meaning. It enhances the work in a certain way, and that is in itself intriguing.
I try, and just like I said when I first started painting, the whole rush of it was getting better, and I still feel like I'm getting better. I don't think as quickly then, but I think I feel like I'm getting better. I think if I didn't, I'd probably quit. I mean, you always want to get better.
Sure.
You certainly don't want to feel like you're plateauing or getting worse.
Well, all of life is a learning experience.
Yeah.
As you keep working, I'm sure you keep learning. Have you always worked in oils? Has that been your preferred? I don't mean
Yeah,
always,
right.
but as when you became committed to painting.
Yeah, I dabbled in watercolors a little and acrylics too. But I found oils you could just do more. At least I could. I could, you know, it was much more forgiving than watercolors.
Yeah, watercolors are a real challenge.
Yeah, yeah.
Once you put that dab of paint down, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. So oils are much easier. Obviously, you can just paint over your mistakes. And
It also gives you a chance to play perhaps a little more than something that dries instantly on your paper.
yeah. Well, there's an interesting thing too. Is when I'm finished my paintings, I sign them. That's the last thing I do. Then I'll leave. The next morning I come back. I've never not had to touch something up. I never had to not fix something. And normally it may take days to fix what I've done even after I've signed it. So the slow process of oils works really good for me because, you know, I'm not sitting down and starting and finishing and painting and that's it. Because for me that wouldn't work the best. You know what I mean? Because it's such
Sure,
a slow
sure.
process. I see my mistakes. Every day when I come back in here, I'll see, oh, what was I thinking? That was horrible. You know, so it gives me an opportunity to fix those things. So it doesn't really feel like I'm painting. It feels like I'm just fixing the mistakes from the day before. You know.
Well, is there a point when you say, okay, stop?
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, the point I always use is, you know, is working on this any longer going to make it really any
Yeah,
better?
yeah.
You know, you got the idea across. You paint it as best as you can, and at some point you just got to say, you know,
Sure.
you got to stop.
Sure. Do you have any particular favorites that I mean, there's so much of your work.
Of my own work?
Of your own work, right. Do you find that there are certain paintings that you feel are very special to you?
No, not really. Yeah, the funny thing is, you know, some artists have a difficulty, you know,
Parting with
parting
their
with
work,
their stuff.
yeah.
I'm kind of the
Right.
opposite. Like, for me, it's not the piece doesn't mean that much. It's really the idea. The interesting thing for me now at this point is, you know, coming up with an idea and thinking, you know, that might be crazy or that may be a good idea, and then sort of seeing it to fruition, and you know, starting it and finishing it, and either being really happy with it or really disappointed in it. But that's the fun part. The actual piece, you know, you're done. It's time to go on to the next one. So
Right.
I don't even have. I think I may have one. I'm not even sure if I do have one painting in my house, but I don't keep any of them. I don't have any of them. So I don't.
They're not tucked away somewhere. So.
No, I mean the one of my kids that's hanging there. I've been forbid to sell that one, so I have that one.
Well, can you talk about some others of your paintings? Maybe point out some things that we should be aware of. I think one thing that's really interesting to me is the view you have of whatever your subject is. We're not looking straight on,
Right.
ever, it seems.
Yeah.
There is always, it's overhead, or it's to the side, or it's from an angle, or...
Well, the simplest answer to that would be, what's the best view? What's the
Yeah.
most interesting view?
But see, that's the kind of thing most of us don't see. We don't see the most interesting view. We see the obvious view.
Right. Well, you know, once you get the idea, and if whatever the painting is, we'll actually set it up. Obviously, you know, I use models, and we'll set it up, and which is always sort of interesting when you have the idea, then you sort of set it up in real life to see it there. You know, like the idea you had, and so then once you set it up, is then, you know, walk around the room, you know, try to figure out what the best angle would be, you know, what the best composition would be, looking at it almost like you were looking at a painting.
Well, does it become somewhat abstracted in that sense,
Yeah.
where you see just forms and
Yeah.
light and dark?
Yeah,
and-
absolutely, yeah. And again, you're just sort of looking at it abstractly and trying to think what would be the most interesting